There's a single moment in Naruto that changed everything. Not the Nine Tails attack, not becoming a genin, not even meeting Sasuke. I'm talking about a technique that would become Naruto's signature move, the jutsu that would help him defeat Pain, fight Sasuke, and eventually become Hokage. But here's what most fans never consider. What if Jiraiya never taught Naruto the Rasengan? What if that 3-month training trip went completely differently? Because when you actually break down the timeline, the power scaling, and the narrative structure of the series, removing this one technique doesn't just change a few fight scenes, it fundamentally breaks the entire story in ways that are absolutely terrifying to think about.
And I'm not talking about simple stuff like, oh, he'd use more shadow clones. No, we need to go deeper, because the Rasengan's absence creates a domino effect that touches everything from the Chunin exams to the Fourth Great Ninja War. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you'll see Naruto's entire journey in a completely different light.
Let's start with the obvious question. Why did Jiraiya teach Naruto the Rasengan in the first place? Most people think it's because Jiraiya wanted to pass down Minato's technique to his son. That's the emotional answer, and it's partially true. But there's a tactical reason that gets overlooked. After the Chunin exams, after Orochimaru placed the 5-element seal on Naruto and Sasuke received the cursed seal, the power gap between them became a real problem. Sasuke could suddenly access Jonin-level power bursts. Meanwhile, Naruto was struggling to control his chakra because of the seal interference. Jiraiya needed to give Naruto something equivalent, something that could match the Chidori's piercing power and the cursed seal's raw output. The Rasengan wasn't just a cool technique to learn, it was a necessary equalizer in the growing rivalry dynamic that would define the series. So, here's where it gets interesting. Without the Rasengan, Jiraiya would still need to give Naruto some kind of power boost during that 3-month training period. The question is, what would he teach instead? You might think shadow clone training or better taijutsu, but there's a problem with that logic. Naruto already uses shadow clones constantly. That's his thing. And taijutsu training, while useful, doesn't give you the kind of dramatic power spike needed to stay relevant in the escalating battles ahead. Remember, by the time we hit Shippuden, Naruto needs to fight Akatsuki members who are S-rank ninja, masters of their craft with techniques developed over decades. This is where the timeline becomes crucial. In the original series, Naruto learns the Rasengan over the course of 3 stages: rotation, power, and containment. Each stage taught him something about chakra control that would later become foundational for learning more advanced techniques. The training arc itself took weeks of intense practice, using the shadow clone jutsu to accelerate the learning process by gaining multiple instances of muscle memory simultaneously.
But here's what that training really did. It gave Naruto his first A-rank technique. Up until that point, his entire arsenal consisted of the shadow clone jutsu and variations of it. The Rasengan was his first truly dangerous offensive technique that didn't rely purely on numbers. And this is where most fan theories about this scenario completely fall apart, because they assume Naruto would just find a different technique to learn, train hard, and boom, problem solved. But that's not how jutsu work in the Naruto universe.
Let's talk about something the series doesn't spend enough time explaining: technique compatibility in chakra nature. Every ninja has an affinity for certain chakra natures. Naruto's primary affinity is wind release, though this isn't revealed until Shippuden during his training with Asuma and Kakashi. The Rasengan is unique because it's a pure shape manipulation technique with no elemental nature. making it teachable to anyone with sufficient chakra control and power. That's actually why Jiraiya chose it. He knew Naruto had massive chakra reserves, but terrible control, so a technique that was all about controlled rotation and containment would force him to develop that skill. But here's the problem. Most powerful jutsu require nature transformation, not just shape manipulation. The Chidori, for example, is a lightning-style technique that concentrates chakra into a piercing thrust. Fire techniques, water techniques, earth techniques, they all require the user to transform their chakra into that elemental nature. In our alternate timeline, where Naruto never learns Rasengan, Jiraiya would likely try to teach him a wind-style jutsu instead. Except there's a massive complication. Neither Jiraiya nor Naruto knew about Naruto's wind affinity during that 3-month training trip. That information doesn't come up until after the time skip. Jiraiya's own specialties are fire release, earth release, and toad-related techniques. He's not a wind-style user. This means Jiraiya would probably default to teaching Naruto fire-style techniques, or focusing heavily on summon-based jutsu. And here's where the butterfly effect really starts to hit. If Naruto's primary offensive technique becomes fire-style or summon-based rather than the Rasengan, his entire fighting style evolves completely differently.
Think about what the Rasengan taught Naruto, beyond just having a powerful attack. It taught him patience. It taught him that sometimes you need to approach a problem from multiple angles. It taught him that his massive chakra reserves could be focused and refined, rather than just thrown around in huge numbers. These lessons shaped how he approached learning every technique afterward, from the Rasen Shuriken to Sage Mode, to eventually controlling the 9 Tails chakra. But there's something even more fundamental at stake here, something that goes beyond techniques and power levels. The Rasengan represented a direct connection between Naruto and his father. When Naruto learned that Minato created the technique, when he realized he was mastering his father's jutsu without even knowing it, that moment gave him a tangible link to his heritage. In a story that's fundamentally about a boy searching for recognition and connection, the Rasengan was a thread that tied him to the legacy he didn't know he had.
Now, let's get to the first major story break, the Sasuke retrieval arc. This is where Naruto and Sasuke have their first major confrontation at the Valley of the End. In the original timeline, this battle ends with Naruto using a 9 Tails enhanced Rasengan against Sasuke's Cursed Seal enhanced Chidori. The clash is iconic, symbolic, and narratively perfect. The two signature techniques, both taught by legendary Sannin, both representing different paths of power, colliding in a battle that defines their relationship for the rest of the series. Without the Rasengan, this entire confrontation changes, and not just aesthetically. The Rasengan gave Naruto a technique that could match the Chidori's destructive power while representing a fundamentally different philosophy. The Chidori is a blade, a killing technique designed for assassination. The Rasengan is a sphere, powerful but less inherently lethal, representing Naruto's desire to bring Sasuke back rather than kill him. The visual symbolism of these techniques clashing is built into the narrative structure. So what happens instead? Does Naruto try to overpower Sasuke with pure 9 Tails chakra and shadow clones? That's certainly possible, but it changes the entire dynamic of the fight. Instead of a battle between two equals who've grown in different directions, it becomes a battle where Naruto has to rely almost entirely on the 9 Tails to compete. That's not the same story. That's not the same emotional weight. And here's where it gets worse. Sasuke would likely win that fight more decisively. In the original timeline, Naruto actually managed to scratch Sasuke's headband with his Rasengan, a symbolic victory even in defeat. Without that technique, without that moment of near triumph, Sasuke leaves the village having completely dominated their confrontation. The psychological impact on both characters shifts dramatically. For Naruto, this means his failure to bring Sasuke back is even more crushing. He couldn't even touch him. For Sasuke, it means he doesn't see Naruto as a rival worth considering. He's just the dead last who happens to have a demon inside him. Their rivalry, which is supposed to be one of mutual respect and acknowledgement, becomes one-sided, and that fundamentally breaks one of the series' core relationships.
But here's what's really wild about this alternate timeline. The story doesn't just change for Naruto, it changes for everyone around him. Let's talk about Konohamaru for a second. In the original timeline, Naruto teaches Konohamaru the Rasengan. This is a huge character moment because it shows Naruto transitioning from student to teacher, passing down what Jiraiya taught him. It's a small moment in the grand scheme of things, but it's symbolically important. It shows growth, maturity, and the cyclical nature of mentorship in the ninja world. Without the Rasengan, this moment never happens. Konohamaru develops completely differently. Maybe he learns different techniques from Ebisu or other Jonin. Maybe he never has that direct technical link to Naruto. The master-student relationship that gets echoed later when Naruto becomes a mentor figure loses one of its most concrete examples. Now scale that up. Think about every moment in the series where Naruto uses the Rasengan. His fight against Kabuto, where the Rasengan breaks through medical ninjutsu. His battle with the Akatsuki members. His training to create the Rasen Shuriken, which becomes one of his most powerful techniques and represents his surpassing of his father's work. All of these moments either disappear or fundamentally change. The Rasen Shuriken is particularly important because it's not just powerful, it's a technique that literally required Naruto to use his shadow clone training method to master. He created thousands of clones to develop his wind chakra nature and combine it with the Rasengan's rotation. That entire training arc, that entire power-up, that entire character development sequence is built on the foundation of already knowing the Rasengan. Without that foundation, Naruto's power progression in Shippuden becomes completely different. He'd need to learn offensive techniques from scratch, while also trying to control the Nine Tails, master Sage Mode, and keep up with opponents who are already far beyond him in skill and experience. The timeline of his development would need to accelerate dramatically, or he'd simply be irrelevant in most of the major battles. And that's when you realize the real problem with this alternate timeline. It's not just that Naruto would be weaker, it's that the entire narrative structure of the series depends on Naruto having this one specific technique at this specific point in his development. Remove it, and the dominoes start falling in ways that make the story we know impossible. Let's jump ahead to what many consider the best fight in the entire series, Naruto versus Pain. This battle is the culmination of everything Naruto has learned up to that point. He uses Sage Mode, enhanced Rasengan variants, strategy, and eventually has to tap into the Nine Tails power. The fight is won through a combination of all these elements, with different Rasengan variations playing a crucial role throughout. The giant Rasengan, the Rasengan barrage, the planetary Rasengan with multiple clones. These aren't just flashy techniques, they're the tools that allow Naruto to overcome Pain's multiple bodies and overwhelming abilities. But the most important moment in that fight isn't about power, it's about philosophy. When Nagato asks Naruto what he'll do to bring peace to the world after all the destruction and pain they've both experienced,
Naruto creates a Rasengan and holds it inches from Nagato's face. Then, he doesn't use it. He chooses to believe in Jiraiya's philosophy instead, choosing understanding over revenge. That moment with the Rasengan is a symbol of his power, and his choice not to use it as a symbol of his growth is one of the most powerful scenes in the series. It represents everything Naruto has learned from Jiraiya, and the Rasengan serves as the physical manifestation of that inheritance. In an alternate timeline without the Rasengan, this entire symbolic weight disappears. Sure, Naruto could still choose not to kill Nagato, but the visual symbolism of holding his master's technique, his father's technique, the representation of his entire ninja way right there in front of his enemy before choosing mercy, that's gone. And with it goes one of the most emotionally resonant moments in the series. But let's get tactical for a moment. Could Naruto actually win that fight without the Rasengan? Pain's abilities include gravity manipulation, soul extraction, summon control, mechanical armor, chakra absorption, and missile barrages. The Deva path alone, with its planetary devastation technique, is capable of destroying the entire village. Naruto won that fight through a combination of Sage Mode sensory abilities, strategic clone usage, and overwhelming offensive power delivered through Rasengan variants. Without those variants, his offensive options become severely limited. Sage Mode enhanced taijutsu is powerful, but Pain's bodies can absorb chakra, summon giant creatures, and literally pull or push you with gravitational force. You need ranged attacks. You need techniques that can overwhelm multiple opponents simultaneously. And you need finishing moves that can take down a body completely before it regenerates or gets replaced.
This is where we need to talk about something the series subtly establishes but never explicitly states. The Rasengan isn't just Naruto's most powerful technique, it's his most versatile technique. And in a fighting system that heavily rewards versatility and adaptation, that matters more than raw power. There's a deeper layer to this that connects to one of Naruto's central themes, inherited will. The concept of inherited will runs throughout the series. Hashirama's will of fire, Madara's infinite Tsukuyomi plan, Obito's corruption of that plan, Naruto inheriting Jiraiya's dream of peace. These philosophical inheritances shape the characters and drive the plot forward. They're what separate Naruto from a simple shonen battle manga and give it thematic weight. The Rasengan is inherited will made physical. Minato created it but never completed it. He never added his chakra nature. Jiraiya couldn't complete it either. Naruto not only completes it by adding wind release to create the Rasen Shuriken, but he does so using a training method only he could execute with his shadow clone technique. He takes an inherited technique and makes it his own, surpassing his father and his master in the process. This is a metaphor for the entire series. Naruto takes the inherited will of fire, the dream of peace from Jiraiya, the determination from his parents, and he doesn't just carry them forward, he transforms them. He creates something new that surpasses what came before while honoring it. Without the Rasengan serving as the physical representation of this theme, you lose a concrete way to show this abstract concept. Sure, Naruto could still inherit philosophical ideals, but having a tangible technique that literally evolves across generations makes the theme visible and visceral rather than abstract and theoretical. And here's something most people don't consider. The Rasengan's development mirrors Naruto's character development. In the original series, it's incomplete but powerful, just like Naruto himself. In Shippuden, he completes it with wind release, representing his maturation and surpassing of his predecessors. Later, he combines it with Sage Mode, then with Nine Tails chakra, then with Six Paths power.
each evolution representing a new stage of his journey. The technique grows with him. It's a visual shorthand for his progression that audiences can immediately understand. When you see a bigger Rasengan, you know Naruto has gotten stronger. When you see it combined with new elements, you know he's learned something new. It's elegant storytelling through power system mechanics.
So, let's actually try to solve this problem. If Naruto never learns Rasengan, what could replace it in a way that maintains narrative coherence? Option 1. Jiraiya focuses entirely on toad summoning techniques. Naruto becomes a summon specialist, relying on Gamabunta and other toads for offense. The problem here is that summoning is expensive, chakra-wise, and doesn't give Naruto a personal technique he can rely on in every situation. It also makes him dependent on external help rather than developing his own power, which contradicts his character arc of proving himself through his own strength. Option 2. Jiraiya teaches Naruto advanced sealing techniques. This is actually interesting because Naruto is an Uzumaki, and the Uzumaki clan was famous for sealing jutsu. This could give Naruto a technical advantage and tie him to his heritage in a different way. But sealing techniques are typically defensive or utility-based, not offensive. They don't give you the kind of dramatic battle-turning power that the Rasengan provides. Option 3. Naruto develops his wind release techniques earlier, working with Asuma or another wind-style user. This is probably the most viable alternative from a power scaling perspective. Wind techniques could give him the offensive options he needs while still representing personal growth. But you lose the connection to Minato, you lose the inherited will symbolism, and you change the thematic structure of his relationship with his father and Jiraiya.
Option 4, and this is where it gets really interesting. What if Naruto focuses entirely on mastering Nine Tails chakra earlier? In the original timeline, he doesn't really start this process until after Pain, when he trains on the island Turtle with Killer Bee. But what if, without the Rasengan as a power option, Jiraiya decides the only way to keep Naruto relevant is to help him control the Nine Tails? This actually changes everything. If Naruto gains Nine Tails Chakra Mode in Part 1 instead of Shippuden, the entire power scaling of the series shifts. He becomes dramatically more powerful much earlier, which means his fights change, his opponents change, and the escalation curve of the series needs to be completely restructured. But here's the thing. None of these alternatives work as well as the Rasengan does. And that's not nostalgia talking. That's structural analysis. The Rasengan functions perfectly as a technique that's powerful enough to matter, teachable enough to be realistic, symbolically rich enough to carry thematic weight, and versatile enough to evolve with the character.
So what's the answer? What actually happens if Naruto never learns Rasengan? The honest answer is, the story we know doesn't exist. You don't just lose a technique, you lose narrative symmetry, thematic cohesion, character development opportunities, and fundamental plot progression. The Rasengan is so deeply woven into the structure of Naruto's journey that removing it doesn't create an alternate timeline, it creates a completely different story. And maybe that's the real insight here. When we watch a long-running series like Naruto, we sometimes forget how carefully constructed the story actually is. We think of individual techniques as interchangeable power-ups, but the best ones are deeply integrated into the narrative fabric. They're not just attacks, they're storytelling devices. The Rasengan works because it's simple enough to understand immediately, but complex enough to evolve meaningfully. It's powerful enough to be impressive, but not so overwhelming that it breaks the power system. It's personal enough to carry emotional weight, but universal enough that other characters can learn it too. It's exactly what the story needed, exactly when it needed it. So,
The next time you see Naruto charge up that spinning ball of chakra, remember, you're not just watching a technique, you're watching the physical manifestation of his entire character arc, his relationships, his growth, and his place in the story. That's why it matters. That's why it can't be replaced. And that's why asking, what if Naruto never learned Rasengan, isn't just a fun thought experiment. It's a question that reveals how carefully constructed storytelling makes meaning through every element, even the ones we take for granted.